Sometimes, when you're walking through life, you realize not everyone around you is walking with you. Some are just there for the ride. God has a way of revealing the truth even when it hurts. And trust me, when He shows you someone's true colors, believe Him the first time. Betrayal is one of the most painful human experiences because it's not just about the act itself. It's about the story you told yourself about that person, that relationship, that trust. You believe they were genuine, loyal, that their words match their intentions. And when the illusion shatters, it's not just the person who falls apart in your mind, it's your sense of judgment, your belief in your ability to understand people and the world around you. And that's why it cuts so deep. It forces you into a kind of existential confrontation with the truth. And the truth doesn't coddle, it reveals. And when God allows you to see that betrayal, that falseness, it feels like He's tearing away something you thought you needed, but in reality, He's exposing something that was never real to begin with. Think about the nature of betrayal for a moment. It's deceptive by design. The betrayer often operates in a way that makes them appear trustworthy, makes them seem like someone who is on your side. That's why it's so destabilizing when the truth emerges. It feels like the ground beneath you has crumbled because you didn't just lose the person, you lost the foundation of trust you built with them. But what you have to understand deeply and painfully is that this isn't a punishment, it's a revelation. It's a lesson wrapped in discomfort, and like most lessons, it's something you'll only fully grasp when you stop resisting it. When someone betrays you, it forces you to examine not only who they were, but who you allowed them to be in your life. Why were they close enough to hurt you in the first place? Did you ignore red flags because you didn't want to confront the truth early on? Did you place them on a pedestal they didn't earn? These are the hard questions that betrayal demands you ask yourself. And as difficult as it is, answering them honestly is how you grow. It's how you begin to see people for who they are, not for who you hope they'll be. God, in His wisdom, doesn't allow you to stay blind forever. If you're paying attention, He'll show you what you need to see, even if it breaks your heart. Because here's the reality. The pain of betrayal pales in comparison to the damage of living in a lie. Imagine spending your life trusting someone who isn't truly trustworthy, building dreams with someone who isn't genuinely invested, sharing your deepest fears with someone who doesn't really care. The betrayal hurts, yes, but it's a merciful hurt, a necessary hurt. It's a kind of hurt that saves you from something much worse. The human tendency when faced with betrayal is to cling to what was. You want to rewind time, go back to when things felt whole, when you didn't know what you know now. There's a longing for the comfort of ignorance, because ignorance doesn't demand change. But here's the thing, God doesn't reveal the truth to keep you comfortable. He reveals it to make you grow, to protect you, to pull you into the light even when you're clinging to the dark. And when that truth comes, it's like a scalpel. It cuts precisely, intentionally, and painfully. But the goal isn't to wound, it's to heal. It's to remove the infection you didn't even know was there. There's also a psychological element to this experience that can't be ignored. Betrayal shakes your understanding of relationships, of human nature, of trust itself. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable reality that not everyone operates with integrity. Some people will manipulate, deceive, and betray not because of who you are, but because of who they are. That's a hard pill to swallow because it's much easier to internalize the blame. You think, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Did I deserve this? But those thoughts are traps. They keep you tethered to the pain instead of learning from it. The truth is, their betrayal says more about them than it ever could about you. And yet, the experience still leaves its mark. It's as though the betrayal plants a seed of doubt in your mind, not just about others, but about yourself. And maybe that's why betrayal can be transformative. It's a crossroads. You can let it harden you, turn you bitter, close you off to the world, or you can let it refine you, teach you, and make you wiser. But here's the catch. That transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires effort, reflection, and the willingness to face the truth without flinching. You have to resist the urge to dismiss the pain or drown it out with distractions. Instead, you have to sit with it, examine it, and ask yourself, what is this teaching me? That's not an easy process. It demands humility, courage, and faith. Faith that the pain is not the end of the story, but a part of it. And that's where God's role becomes so crucial. When He reveals the truth, He doesn't just leave you to deal with it alone. He gives you the tools, the strength, and the grace to navigate it. But you have to trust Him. You have to trust that the exposure of betrayal is for your benefit, not your destruction. It's a form of divine intervention, a way of redirecting your path, removing the weeds so you can grow. It's as though God is saying, this is not where you're meant to stay. This is not who you're meant to rely on. Let me show you something better. What's fascinating is that betrayal often becomes a defining moment in people's lives. It's a turning point, a catalyst for change. It forces you to reevaluate your boundaries, your values, and your vision for the future. It teaches you to be more discerning, to guard your heart without closing it off completely. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches you to rely on God more than on people. Because people, no matter how well-intentioned, are fallible. They can let you down. But God, He's constant. He's faithful. And when He allows you to see the truth, it's because He loves you too much to let you stay in a lie. When you pray for clarity, for wisdom, or for direction, it's a dangerous thing, though perhaps not in the way you might initially think. It's dangerous because you're essentially asking for the truth. And truth, by its very nature, is disruptive. It tears apart illusions, forces you to confront uncomfortable realities, and often demands change. That's the weight of it. You might believe you're ready to see things clearly, but when the clarity comes, it rarely arrives gently. It doesn't whisper, it shakes the ground beneath your feet. And in the process, it often removes people from your life who were never meant to stay. That's not cruelty, that's mercy. It's a kind of divine act of pruning, cutting away the parts of your life that don't serve your growth. What you must understand is that God's purpose for you is always greater than your own short-term comfort. When He takes something or someone away, it's because they've reached the limit of their role in your story. This is not an easy concept to accept, because human beings are creatures of attachment. We hold on, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of sheer habit. But attachment can also blind us. It can keep us tethered to people who don't genuinely care for us, who drain us, who weigh us down. And when God begins to reveal their true nature, it's like a veil being lifted. Suddenly, you see what was always there but was hidden behind charm, convenience, or the stories you told yourself about who they were. And make no mistake, this revelation, while necessary, is profoundly unsettling. You'll start to notice things that don't align with what you believed. Little inconsistencies that seemed insignificant at first will suddenly stand out like glaring warning signs. The words they speak won't match their actions. Their presence, which once felt reassuring, will start to feel hollow or even disingenuous. This process isn't easy and it isn't painless. It can feel like you're losing something vital, like you're being stripped of relationships you thought you couldn't live without, but it's not a loss. It's a clearing. And though it hurts, it's ultimately for your good. The idea that God removes people to protect you might seem harsh, but it's an act of profound love. It's a way of saying, you can't see what I see. You can't know the harm this person will cause you if they remain in your life. Let me take them away so you can move forward. Think of it as a gardener tending to a tree. To an outsider, pruning might look destructive, cutting off branches, stripping away what seems to be a part of the whole. But the gardener knows that pruning is necessary for the tree to thrive. The branches that are removed are the ones that no longer bear fruit or that drain energy from the parts of the tree that are still growing. In the same way, God removes people who are no longer aligned with your purpose, not out of cruelty, but out of care. This pruning process can also feel deeply personal. You might think, why me? Why is this happening to me? But that's a misunderstanding of the situation. It's not about punishment, it's about preparation. God sees the bigger picture, the path you can't yet fully comprehend. He knows what's ahead, the opportunities and challenges that require you to be at your strongest. And sometimes that strength requires letting go of what no longer serves you. It's not easy to accept because human beings are wired to seek stability, to resist change. But growth and comfort rarely coexist. And when you pray for clarity, you're asking for growth, even if you don't realize it at the time. What's particularly challenging about this process is the temptation to resist it. When someone begins to fade from your life, when the truth about their intentions or character becomes evident, there's a part of you that might want to cling tighter. You'll rationalize their behavior, make excuses, or even blame yourself for their shortcomings. This is the mind's way of trying to maintain the status quo to avoid the pain of loss. But this resistance only prolongs the inevitable. The longer you hold on to what God is trying to remove, the more painful the process becomes. And so, the challenge lies in trusting that the removal is for your benefit, even when it feels like a loss. There's also a humility required in this process. You have to accept that you don't always know what's best for you. That's a hard pill to swallow because it challenges the illusion of control. But if you can surrender to the idea that God's wisdom far surpasses your own, it becomes easier to let go. It's not about passivity or weakness. It's about recognizing that your perspective is limited. What you see as a setback might actually be a setup for something far greater than you imagine. But you won't see that until you've walked through the process, until you've let go of what's holding you back. Another layer to this is understanding that God's timing is perfect. When He removes someone, it might not make sense in the moment. You might feel blindsided or confused, but with time, patterns begin to emerge. You'll start to see how their absence created space for new opportunities, new relationships, or even just peace of mind. You'll realize that the very act of letting them go was what allowed you to grow into the person you were meant to become. It's only in hindsight that the pieces begin to fit together, that you can look back and say, now I see why that had to happen. The experience of having someone removed from your life is, at its core, an invitation to trust. Trust in God's plan, trust in His timing, and trust in your own ability to move forward. It's not about denying pain or pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about facing that pain head on, acknowledging it, and then choosing to believe that it serves a purpose. That's not easy, and it's not quick. But it's necessary. And in the end, it's worth it. Your time, your energy, your attention, these are finite resources, and they are far more precious than most of us are willing to admit. We spend so much of our lives giving parts of ourselves to people who neither value them nor deserve them. It's not because we're inherently foolish or naive, but because we crave connection, approval, and a sense of belonging. The problem is that not everyone who enters your life comes with pure intentions. Some people see what you have to offer and take it as an opportunity to extract, to consume, to use what benefits them, without ever considering the impact it has on you. And if you're not careful, if you don't learn to discern who truly deserves access to you, you'll find yourself depleted, drained, and resentful, wondering how you ended up feeling so empty. This is one of life's hard truths. Not everyone deserves access to you. It's a truth that might sound harsh, but it's an essential one if you want to live a life of purpose and authenticity. It's a boundary that protects you, and it's a boundary that God, in His infinite wisdom, often enforces on your behalf. When He allows you to see the reality of someone's character, their selfishness, their deceit, their lack of genuine care, it's not to make you bitter or cynical. It's to wake you up to the fact that your worth is too great to be squandered on people who don't recognize it. Part of the problem is that we often don't see the true cost of giving ourselves to the wrong people. We tell ourselves stories to justify their behavior. They're just going through a tough time, or they don't mean to act that way, or maybe if I give them a little more, they'll change. And sometimes, those stories have a kernel of truth in them. People do go through difficult seasons, and everyone has flaws. But there's a difference between someone who is flawed yet sincere, and someone who uses your kindness as a means to exploit you. The former is someone who grows with you, who values your presence and reciprocates your efforts. The latter is someone who takes and takes without ever considering the toll it takes on you. What makes this dynamic even more complicated is the fact that we're wired to avoid conflict and loss. We don't want to admit that someone we've invested in, whether emotionally, financially, or spiritually, might not have our best interests at heart. It feels like a personal failure, like we've made a mistake in judgment. And so instead of confronting the truth, we double down. We give more, we forgive more, we hope more, all in the desperate attempt to salvage a relationship that was never meant to thrive in the first place. But there's a cost to that. Every time you pour yourself into someone who doesn't pour back, you lose a little bit of yourself. You lose time that could have been spent on people who truly care about you. You lose energy that could have been directed toward your growth and purpose. You lose peace of mind, which is one of the most valuable things you have. When God reveals that someone doesn't deserve access to you, it's a painful moment of clarity, but it's also a gift. It's His way of saying you've given enough. It's time to protect what's left. It's not about building walls to keep everyone out. It's about building gates that allow the right people in. There's a profound difference between isolating yourself out of fear and setting boundaries out of wisdom. The former is rooted in distrust, while the latter is rooted in self-respect. Boundaries are not about rejecting others, they're about honoring yourself. And sometimes God steps in to enforce those boundaries when you're too hesitant to do it yourself. One of the most challenging aspects of this process is learning to trust what God reveals to you. When someone's actions consistently contradict their words, when their presence in your life feels more like a burden than a blessing, it's easy to second guess yourself. You might think, maybe I'm overreacting, or maybe I'm not being fair, but those instincts, those feelings of unease, are often God's way of speaking to you. They're the whispers of truth that urge you to pay attention, to stop ignoring what's right in front of you. And when those whispers turn into undeniable evidence, you have a choice to make. You can either cling to the illusion, or you can step into the freedom that comes with letting go. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you hold bitterness in your heart or wish harm upon the person. It means recognizing that your life is too valuable to be weighed down by relationships that don't align with your purpose. It means understanding that every moment you spend trying to fix or maintain something that's broken is a moment you could be spending building something meaningful. It's not selfish, it's stewardship. It's about being a good steward of the gifts, talents, and time that God has entrusted to you. The people who truly belong in your life will honor those things. They won't take without giving, and they won't leave you questioning your worth. They'll challenge you to grow, yes, but they'll also uplift you, support you, and walk alongside you in mutual respect. Those are the relationships worth nurturing. And sometimes, clearing away the people who don't deserve access to you is the only way to make room for those. What makes this process so transformative is that it forces you to redefine how you see yourself. When you start setting boundaries, when you start being selective about who gets your time and energy, you begin to realize just how much you're worth. You stop basing your value on how much you can give to others and start recognizing the inherent value of who you are. That shift changes everything. It's not about becoming self-centered, it's about becoming self-aware. It's about stepping into the truth of who God created you to be and refusing to let anyone diminish that truth for their own gain. When trust is broken, something fundamental within you shifts. It's not just about the betrayal itself, it's about what it does to your understanding of the world, of relationships, of yourself. Trust is the cornerstone of human connection. It's what allows us to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up, to invest emotionally in others. And when someone betrays that trust, it's like a fracture, not just between you and them, but within you. It challenges your perception of reality. You question not only their actions, but your own judgment, your ability to discern, to see people for who they truly are. And that's a devastating place to find yourself, because trust isn't just given, it's built over time. It's fragile, and once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild in the same way. What makes betrayal so damaging is that it often comes from those you least expect. It's the people closest to you, the ones you've allowed into your inner circle, the ones you've shared your hopes, fears, and dreams with. That's why it cuts so deeply, because betrayal requires proximity. A stranger can hurt you, but they can't betray you. Betrayal comes from those who had your trust, who knew your vulnerabilities, who were in a position to protect you, but chose instead to harm you. And when that happens, it feels like a part of you has been stolen. Your sense of safety, your belief in others, your ability to fully trust, all of it comes into question. The pain of broken trust is often compounded by the stories we tell ourselves about it. We think, if I had been smarter, this wouldn't have happened. If I had seen the signs, I could have prevented it. And while there may be lessons to learn in hindsight, those thoughts often come from a place of self-blame. It's easier to believe that you had control over the situation than to accept that someone you cared about acted in a way that was completely outside of your control. But that's the nature of betrayal. It's not about you, it's about them. It's about their choices, their character, their inability to honor the trust you placed in them. And that's a hard truth to accept. because it means acknowledging that no matter how careful, kind, or wise you are, you can't control how others will behave. When God allows you to see the truth about someone, it's not to destroy your ability to trust, it's to refine it. He's showing you what was always there, even if you couldn't see it at first. And that revelation, while painful, is a form of protection. It's His way of saying, this is not where you're meant to place your trust. This is not someone who can walk with you into the future I have for you. That kind of clarity is a gift. Even though it doesn't feel like one in the moment, it feels like loss, like disillusionment, like the ground beneath you has been pulled away. But what's really happening is that God is redirecting you, teaching you to anchor your trust in Him rather than in fallible human beings. This doesn't mean you're supposed to go through life distrusting everyone. That's not the lesson here. The lesson is about discernment, about being wise with your trust, about understanding that not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some people are seasonal. They're there to teach you something, to help you grow in a specific way, or even to reveal something about yourself. But when their time is up, when their actions no longer align with the path you're on, holding on to them only causes more harm. It's like clinging to a branch that's already breaking. You might think you're holding on to stability, but all you're really doing is delaying the inevitable fall. What makes this process so transformative is that it forces you to confront your own boundaries, your own expectations, your own values. When someone betrays your trust, it's an opportunity to reassess what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to overlook, and what you truly need in relationships. It's not about becoming jaded or cynical. It's about becoming wiser, more attuned to the red flags you might have ignored in the past, more willing to walk away from situations that compromise your peace or your integrity. And perhaps the most important part of this process is learning to trust yourself again. Because when trust is broken, it's not just the other person you doubt, it's your own ability to see clearly, to make good decisions, to protect yourself. That's the real wound of betrayal. It shakes your confidence in your own judgment. But God doesn't reveal the truth to leave you in a state of doubt and insecurity. He reveals it to strengthen you, to teach you that even when others fail you, He never will. He reveals it to remind you that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by who you are in Him. Rebuilding trust, whether with others or within yourself, is a slow and deliberate process. It requires patience, reflection, and a willingness to face the discomfort of the truth. But as you move through that process, you begin to see the gift within the pain. You begin to recognize that trust, when placed in the right people and in the right things, is not a weakness but a strength. You begin to understand that broken trust, as painful as it is, doesn't have to define you, it can refine you. It can teach you to value your time, your energy, your heart. It can teach you to be more intentional about who you let into your life and to hold on to those who truly deserve to be there. When someone reveals their true colors, it's not just an external experience, it's an internal reckoning. There's a moment of undeniable clarity, almost like the pulling back of a curtain, and you're confronted with a reality that you might have ignored or rationalized for far too long. It's painful because it challenges the stories you've told yourself about who they were, about what your relationship meant, about how safe and predictable the world is. It's a shock to the system, not just because of what it says about them, but because of what it forces you to confront within yourself. We have this incredible capacity to create narratives about the people in our lives. We see their actions through the lens of our hopes, our desires, and our ideals, often ignoring the inconsistencies and red flags that don't fit the picture. It's not because we're blind or foolish, it's because we're deeply wired to seek connection and harmony. We want to believe the best about those we care for, because believing otherwise threatens the foundation of the relationship. But when the mask slips, when someone's actions reveal a side of them you hadn't acknowledged, it's like being hit with a tidal wave of truth. It's disorienting and it's heartbreaking. But at its core, it's also a gift, though it doesn't feel like one in the moment. This revelation forces you to wrestle with an uncomfortable but necessary question. Why didn't I see this sooner? And the answer, more often than not, is that you did see it. You saw the little signs, the small betrayals of character. Moments that didn't sit right with you, but you ignored them. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal, or that you were overreacting, or that they didn't really mean it. You suppress the discomfort because acknowledging it would have required you to act. It would have required you to set boundaries, to have difficult conversations, or to let go of the relationship entirely. And that's terrifying because it means stepping into uncertainty, into the unknown. It's far easier in the short term to stay in the illusion. But illusions don't last, and when they shatter, the impact is all the more devastating for how long you tried to hold them together. What's so profoundly challenging about this process is that it feels like a betrayal, not just by the other person, but by your own instincts. You start to question yourself. How could I not have seen this? How could I have let this happen? And those questions cut deep because they strike at the heart of your sense of agency, your ability to protect yourself. But this is where the true growth lies, not in blaming yourself, but in understanding yourself, in recognizing that your desire for connection, for love, for acceptance sometimes clouds your judgment, in seeing that your willingness to give people the benefit of the doubt, while noble, can also leave you vulnerable to manipulation or mistreatment. It's not about beating yourself up for what you didn't see. It's about learning to trust your instincts, to listen to that inner voice that whispers when something feels off. When God allows you to see the truth about someone, it's not to shame you or to punish you, it's to free you. It's His way of breaking the chains of illusion and bringing you into alignment with reality. And while that process is painful, it's also liberating. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that everything is fine, that their actions don't matter, that the relationship isn't harming you. You're forced to confront what is, rather than clinging to what you wish it could be. And in that confrontation, you find strength, you find clarity, you find the courage to make choices that honor your worth and your well-being. The difficulty lies in the fact that seeing the truth is only the first step. Acting on it is where the real challenge begins. It's one thing to recognize that someone isn't who you thought they were. It's another to let them go, to set boundaries, to walk away if necessary. That takes an incredible amount of courage because it requires you to face loss, even when the relationship was toxic, even when the person hurt you. There's still a sense of grief when they leave your life. You're not just mourning them, you're mourning the future you envisioned, the version of them you hoped they could become, the part of yourself that you gave to them. And that's a heavy burden to carry, but it's also a necessary one because it's through that mourning that you heal. What's remarkable about this process is that it doesn't just change how you see them, it changes how you see yourself. It forces you to redefine your boundaries, your values, your expectations. It teaches you that your worth isn't tied to someone else's ability to see it, that your peace is more important than someone else's approval, that your time and energy are too valuable to be spent on people who don't respect them. It's a painful lesson, but it's also a transformative one, because on the other side of that pain is freedom. The freedom to be selective about who you let into your life. The freedom to prioritize your own growth and happiness. The freedom to let go of relationships that no longer serve you. What's also remarkable is that this process, as painful as it is, strengthens your faith. It reminds you that God is not only a source of comfort, but also a source of truth. He doesn't just shield you from harm, He reveals it so that you can confront it, learn from it, and rise above it. And in doing so, He draws you closer to Him, closer to the path He's laid out for you, closer to the person you were created to be. That's not an easy journey, but it's a necessary one, because it's through the breaking that you're rebuilt stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your purpose. When people leave your life, it feels like the ground shifts beneath you. The absence they leave behind creates a void, a space that aches with questions and uncertainties. You wonder why they left, what you could have done differently, whether it was your fault or theirs, and what this departure means for the road ahead. It's not just the loss of a person, it's the loss of the potential you once believed existed in that relationship, the shared moments, the unspoken promises, the imagined future. And that loss doesn't just sit on the surface, it burrows deep, digging into the core of your identity and forcing you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself, your choices, and your values. We often struggle with the idea that someone's departure might actually be for the best. When you've invested time, energy, and emotion into a relationship, it's hard to let go of the narrative you've built around it. You want to believe that every connection has a purpose, that every person who enters your life is meant to stay, that you can somehow make it work if you just try harder, give more, or hold on tighter. But the truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with you for the long haul. Some people are seasonal, brought into your life to teach you a lesson, to reveal something about yourself, or to push you in a direction you wouldn't have chosen on your own. And when their time is up, their leaving is not just an end, it's a beginning. It's difficult to reconcile the pain of their absence with the possibility of their departure being necessary. We're wired to seek connection, to hold on to what's familiar, to avoid the discomfort of change. And so, when someone leaves, our instinct is to resist it, to fight against the reality of their absence, to cling to the hope that things might return to the way they were. But what we often fail to see is that their leaving might be an act of grace. It might be God's way of making space in your life for something or someone better suited to where you're going. It might be His way of protecting you from a relationship that would have hindered your growth, drained your energy, or taken you off course. The challenge is in trusting that process, in believing that their departure serves a purpose even when it doesn't make sense in the moment. It's hard to see the hand of God in the middle of the storm, to believe that the emptiness you feel is part of a larger plan, to trust that what feels like loss is actually a form of gain. But that's the paradox of growth. It often requires pruning. Just as a tree must lose its weaker branches to grow stronger, you must sometimes let go of relationships that no longer serve your purpose, even if doing so feels like cutting away a part of yourself. This isn't to say that the pain of their leaving is invalid or that you should simply move on without feeling the weight of their absence. The pain is real, and it's important to honor it, to grieve the loss of what was, to acknowledge the impact they had on your life, to reflect on the lessons their presence and their departure have taught you. But it's equally important not to get stuck there, not to let the loss define you, not to allow their absence to eclipse the possibilities that lie ahead. Because as painful as their leaving might be, it's not the end of your story. It's a chapter, and like every chapter, it serves a purpose in the larger narrative of your life. One of the hardest things to accept is that some departures are necessary for your growth. Sometimes people leave because they've taken you as far as they can, because their role in your story has come to an end. And that's not a reflection of your worth or their failure. It's simply the nature of life. People change, circumstances shift, paths diverge. And while it's tempting to view those changes as losses, they're often opportunities in disguise. Opportunities to grow stronger, to become more self-reliant, to discover new aspects of yourself, to align more fully with your purpose. The departure of someone from your life often reveals truths you might have been unwilling or unable to see before. It forces you to reevaluate your priorities, to reassess what you want and need in your relationships, to confront the parts of yourself that might have contributed to the dynamic. And in doing so, it provides an opportunity for transformation. Because in the absence of what was, there's space for what could be. Space to rebuild, to refocus, to realign with the person you're becoming rather than the person you once were. What's remarkable about this process is that it's not just about loss, it's about clarity. When someone leaves, it often brings into focus what you truly value, what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not. It sharpens your understanding of who you are and what you need, and it empowers you to make choices that align with that understanding. It's a painful clarity, yes, but it's also a liberating one. Because once you see the truth, you can't go back to living in the illusion. You can't go back to settling for less than you deserve, to ignoring the red flags, to sacrificing your peace for the sake of maintaining a relationship that wasn't meant to last. There's a profound sense of freedom that comes with embracing this truth, with accepting that not everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. It's not about bitterness or resentment. It's about recognizing the impermanence of relationships and the role they play in your journey. It's about being grateful for the time you had with them, even if it was shorter than you hoped. It's about finding peace in the understanding that their leaving doesn't diminish your worth. It highlights it. Because the people who are truly meant to walk with you will do so willingly, wholeheartedly, and without reservation. And their presence will feel like a blessing, not a burden. When you let go of those who leave, you're not just releasing them, you're releasing yourself. from the expectations that kept you tied to the past, from the fears that kept you from moving forward, from the doubts that told you their leaving was a reflection of your failure. You're stepping into a new chapter, one that holds the promise of growth, of discovery, of relationships that align with your purpose and your values. And while the transition is never easy, it's always worth it, because every ending is also a beginning, and every departure clears the way for something new to enter your life.